Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, SD-WANs, Scalable Security Made Simple for MSPs. I'm Amber Noble, a marketing specialist at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. While I get us started off here, if you could take a moment to answer the poll question on your screen if you have not already done so, it would be of great help to us. Today, I'm joined by Mark Balagier, a systems engineer here at Barracuda MSP. Mark brings with him over a decade of experience in information technology. During today's educational webinar, Mark will take us through an in-depth walkthrough of SD-WAN and outline main concerns and challenges commonly encountered, helping us to understand the perfect balance between performance and security. Before we get started, let's do some brief housekeeping. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to share them using the questions or chat panels to the right of the Zoom webinar screen. At the conclusion of the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief polling survey. Please take a moment to tell us what you think so we can continually improve the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mark to begin today's presentation. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Amber, and thanks for everyone for spending time with us today. So just to get started, a little bit of background. So connectivity around the world is changing. There's really no doubt about it. And in order to understand where we're going, we need to spend a little bit of time understanding where we've come from and why these changes are really affecting us. So let's talk about the evolution of wide area networks first. On the next slide, we're going to see kind of where the world starts. On the left-hand side, you'll see what we know and understand so well. This is what Microsoft actually refers to as the crunchy shell around our environment. It's fundamentally a firewall that is our single protection point against the outer world, where kind of all the scary big bad internet is. And everything inside the firewall, that shell is secured by the firewall and other security measures they've implemented. If there are remote locations, they are also securely connected and protected through that central firewall. So now we can take a look at some of the characteristics of this environment. And the big thing here is the characteristics are vertically scaled. So large data centers have finite resources, and when you hit that finite resource limit, you run out of capacity. So in that respect, we basically make decisions on how to meet capacity requirements, and that could be challenging and expensive. So really everything was decided for these backhaul networks with an aggregated policy in a central location. These firewalls are really feature heavy because they're basically doing a lot of things. They're designed to secure data from users, applications, as well as make traffic decisions at a granular level. Large environments with vertical scaling aren't typically heavily orchestrated because they're static. So it's kind of set it up and forget it. So we need to move from this next gen world and really its many shortcomings to the cloud generation. So what does that really mean? It's a different environment. And this crunchy shell Microsoft describes has all of it pretty much gone away. The users, data, and applications have all dispersed. We have people who want to use applications anywhere on any device at any time, accessing data from clouds and do it from anywhere, at a coffee shop, at home, at the home office, and so on. So as we move forward, this environment has a very different concept and a very different set of requirements related to security. So in the cloud generation, the environment dictates that you should basically put firewalls or security devices at the source and secure the data and applications wherever they are. So in order to accomplish this, we need to move away from that older characteristic of vertical scaling and move towards more horizontal scaling. So having the flexibility to scale out and add not even an additional, but many firewalls and have this distributed policy. So if I've got firewalls all over the place, I don't want to manage those individual firewalls one at a time. I want this centralized management, and I want it really simple to achieve this distributed policy. If I'm doing this, I also want my users to connect securely. I want to reduce my burden on MPLS, save the money while doing that. And we need to regulate the traffic going into and out of all of the data centers all over the place and contain these flows. And once we understand them better, we can optimize that bandwidth. So there are many security devices in this environment. And again, having to touch them all is a pain. So having zero-touch deployment and never having to worry about them is a key factor. And so because of this, this whole kind of portfolio of security we're putting in, you want that extra layer of visibility to make sure that everything's going as it should. So these are kind of the important factors. Adding another layer of complexity, we're going off into the public cloud and talking about public cloud. So this is elastic scaling. So meaning being able to scale out horizontally without really any limitations. So dealing with dispersed workloads, depending on what's going on at a specific time of day, requires a lot of orchestration at the API level. So this API integration is really everything that makes the cloud possible, and being able to perform at the top of overarching everything and keep it going smoothly. So you need to support the public cloud use cases and vary that platform to platform in terms of integration. And so the way we consume firewalls and the public cloud is a little bit different. So right now, in this day and age, we live and die by that single model of one firewall, one license. Well, public cloud is all about scaling, so you can go from having 1 or 2 firewalls, and the next day it's Cyber Monday, and you need 1,000 of them, depending on how big your customer is. So you don't want to have to buy 1,000 or 10,000 licenses for that one day. And so getting that elastic flexibility in the public cloud is really important. So you want to look at security like you do your electricity bill, pay for what you use. And so it becomes about what's secured, the volume of secure traffic, as opposed to that one-to-one relationship. So these are really the new requirements that we're seeing on the right side, and it's much, much different from what we're seeing on the left side. So they require a different approach to security and a different approach to how we distribute traffic around the world. And so there's a nice quote on this slide here. It's not just Barracuda saying this, but one of the leaders from Gartner's SD-WAN space, as you can see here. So the future of SD-WAN lies in balanced security and advanced WAN capabilities. And so it's finding that perfect piece in between, making sure you're leveraging all of these technologies. I really agree with that statement. So I don't remember exactly what the poll was, but it looks like it's not too far off. So this migration is in full swing, though. Old data that we're looking at here, but you can see the decline of basically keeping everything private to the increase in cloud environments. So if you extrapolate this out additional years, you're going to see that it's just getting more and more exacerbated. Hybrid cloud is really the thing that's going on right now. And so, it looks great. You can look at the chart, but it doesn't go without its issues. Leveraging software as a service applications might seem to be a no-brainer, but there's other things to consider. So there's a really interesting article in Network World, basically talking about this distributed organization migrating from Exchange on-prem to O365. Run-of-the-mill thing. It happens to a lot of organizations wanting to upgrade email security and additional applications. But it's a tough thing, so you want to be sure that you're kind of paying attention to all the pieces that go on with this. So in this article, basically they talk about how SharePoint online, so they're moving everything to SharePoint. So you're picturing this in your head. So you've got a distributed architecture that basically involves backhauling everything over the MPLS to a centralized location through this giant firewall, which is also your internet access and a breakout internet at any point in time. So before they did this migration, they did some testing at a central site. Of course, no issues they found. Everything looks great with the cloud. So they went ahead and did the migration, only to find that once they completed the migration, the help desk phones went crazy. What's going on? All these issues are being reported. And basically it was around this application, SharePoint Online. And the reason for this is because SharePoint itself is, maybe you think it's a passive application, but really there's a lot of constant communication going on, updating data sheets, updating spreadsheets, stuff like that in real time. That's all constantly happening. And so the round trip latency became an issue. I guess for SharePoint, it was 50 milliseconds, and basically the experience goes way, way down. So unfortunately, at that point, they didn't do enough testing or enough research to understand what those needs were, and they basically got that SharePoint application to a point where it's pretty much unusable. And so, with that story, you kind of get the idea. Don't want to, beat it to death, but you needed to have some considerations when you're doing this migration. What you're doing with software as a service applications, what you needed to do to update your backend infrastructure. It can be costly, and it's even more costly if you don't do it correctly. So you don't want to just straight move to the public cloud. So let's talk about some of what the challenges and issues are. So we start to make the transition or consider this transition. These are the kind of the questions we look at. So what are the challenges with today's WAN infrastructure? Basically can be summed up in two primary drivers from migrating away from the older infrastructure into SD-WAN. So basically, SD-WAN is about getting to applications in a faster, more efficient, and reliable way, basically reducing that backhauling. So by doing that, getting these applications to use branch-to-cloud technology, we basically become less dependent on MPLS, and by doing that, we save money. So two primary drivers, basically to sum it up, we get to the cloud and we save a few dollars. So we'll talk a little bit about that in later on in the presentation. But the benefits and concerns with implementing SD-WAN, so this is huge. So you've invested a ton of money already in your customer sites. You deployed all these expensive firewalls, sandboxes, web security gateways, all these other things, web filtering going on. And basically, it takes a lot of time and money to implement those. So it's a little bit of a shift. And then exposing remote locations to the public cloud and all of the the good and bad that goes along with it can be scary. And so you want to make sure that you can afford to secure that architecture and make sure that you're doing it the right way. And so the question is, can SD-WAN improve that performance? If you don't get something out of it, what's the point? How should we do it? Is there a box solution or is there an all-one solution? Where does this all go? So it's a shift. So going back a little bit more of a diagram, so starting from the beginning, this is basically what your customer network probably looks like. There's that central data center protected by this large monolithic firewall. Maybe there's some fancy custom ASICs or who knows. All your applications, data, everything else is sitting inside that data center. I'm sure there's some remote locations. They're also getting sent into there over that MPLS. So that branch office communication is still going on. And then depending on the type of customer, some of these little boxes could be ATMs, point of sale centers, whatever. It doesn't really matter. There could be more sites, but really everything is backhauled to that data center. Everything's sent to those servers and applications in that data center, and it's supporting all of those remote users. So that's kind of table stakes. That's the world as we know it right now. What we'll see is that over time, these applications start to migrate. So we just picked out a couple here, but you see up there Salesforce, Google Apps, O365. You start seeing the trend, things are moving up into the cloud. And if they're moving in the cloud, then they're vacating your data center. So as we get further down the road, you start to consider these things public cloud, and then ultimately you make a jump and leap, and then your data center is pretty much done. There's nothing there. So why do you still have it? And so as you see, it's just, if there's nothing left there, sorry, went slide too far. So if there's nothing there, then why are we doing all this backhauling in the first place? And that's kind of the real question. This is how the architecture's evolved. So, and this is why we need this new architecture. So you need this branch to cloud architecture we're talking about, direct internet breakouts. But what comes with this is a lot of issues, like how do you maintain the security controls? And you've invested a lot of money. Again, like I said, putting all those resources into that central location and managing it that way. Again, VPNs, how is this all going to work? So we start to think about how we implement security into your customers' remote locations. And basically, you want it to be as good as, obviously, if not better than the security at your headquarters. And so you want to make sure that this is all coming to fruition. So it can be cost prohibitive, but what's nice, Barracuda is able to basically circumvent this and make it a simple and secure path to provide an SD-WAN solution. And again, not just us, not just Barracuda saying this, but Gartner's been at it for a while. The emergence of public cloud computing has rendered traditional enterprise WAN architectures to be suboptimal from a price and performance perspective. So, that's just kind of the way of things now. It's more and more expensive to do this, and it's just not as efficient with the advent of this new technology. But it takes a while to make changes. So as you see here, roughly 66% are still backhauling traffic to the data center. Some are using it for local breakouts. Really, it's just still not a popular choice. But those are the issues. MPLS is great. It's reliable. It's very secure. It's good stuff. If you pulled out a cable and took a look inside, you can look down that fiber all the way over to your other location. Obviously, it doesn't work like that, but you get the idea. That's a direct connection, dedicated line. So a point-to-point network, or a virtual private network, VPN, if you like, is fast, low latency, and relatively low latency, depending on how far you're going and what you're sending. But basically, in the past, it addressed packet loss, jitter, delay associated with mission-critical applications like voice and video, and without a doubt, VPN is very secure. The trouble is that it's dated, though. So it's been around since the 80s, and again, designed for backhauling. It wasn't designed for basically the things we're doing today in the cloud. So if you have this, you also know it's pretty expensive with limited bandwidth. MPLS can take months to deploy. If you really want to get into it from the business side, contracts going on for months and months, trying to negotiate multiple carriers across multiple countries or continents, that can be a whole other headache in itself. So that renewing contracts, it just becomes a headache, and it's a real pain. So if we can reduce the dependency on that, we're taking steps in the right direction. So if you're connecting sites to get to the cloud, SD-WAN, or you're just trying to save money on MPLS, SD-WAN is still the way to go. But again, there are some challenges. So we can talk about this from a Barracuda perspective. The first thing, you're going to create this model. You need to manage at a massive scale, tens, hundreds, even thousands of sites in your larger customers. But to do this, you don't want to manage anything, not even 5 sites, let alone 1,000. So the story is the same. How do you create the centralized management, distribute it across all the firewalls you've got in your infrastructure, and make it appear like you're just managing from one pane of glass, one firewall? You'll need that advanced functionality, though, because it's not just like you're pushing traffic straight out to the internet. You want to make sure that you're doing some intelligent routing and making sure that you're optimizing infrastructure. Another piece, threat protection. You've done that investment at the central location, first in the sandbox, and then possibly on-prem. And so you don't want to have to deploy this expensive sandbox in all your remote locations as well, having that as an additional cost. So what you do is everything else. You route it to the cloud and move and do that protection there. You scrub the traffic before it arrives at your infrastructure so it arrives clean. Again, instead of deploying devices on premises, do it in the cloud. Cloud approach to life. So doing everything, cleaning, scrubbing in the cloud, so you don't have to deploy everything and manage it from that one device individually. So you do need the firewalls. You still have remote locations, and that's why your central management will take care of things and make things better. But you do need to still deploy them to those remote locations for that secure protection. And then the core requirement, again, what we're talking about this whole presentation, is to get to the cloud. It's not good enough to literally have an SD-WAN and just route it to the cloud. If you have multi-cloud, so if you're doing AWS and or Azure, you want to make sure traffic in between them is getting passed back and forth properly. Your security controls are consistent, regardless of how that's deployed. And so you want to keep those policies universal across the board through an integrated security solution. And then being able to deploy a firewall in the cloud is even more helpful. So you're protecting it, again, right at the source. And then finally, the WAN optimization. You want to make sure you're compressing traffic and making intelligent decisions about how to route it. So that's what you need, and that's all absolutely correct what the industry has defined. But let's pivot away and kind of understand, we understand the problem now, and let's talk about the solution. So 13 years ago, Barracuda started out and acquired a company called Fion. It was based in Austria. Basically, 2 professors got together and created what is now known as SD-WAN. Basically, back then, they were contracted by a very large bank in Europe to figure out how to securely get all remote ATM machines to connect to a central site securely and economically, so it didn't cost too much. And really, it was a tough challenge because it couldn't be done with a dial-up modem, and then the other solutions were very, very expensive. So in this proposal, they basically decided that they could create this, and they went ahead and did this, and it became SD-WAN. So they discovered along the way that a large element of what they needed to solve this problem of aggregating a lot of remote locations was the question of security. So over the next 13 years, hacking and attacks have taken many shapes and forms, and so they came up with this model in order to effectively do SD-WAN as a whole and connect all these devices remotely and securely. You have 6 requirements. And so these are the 6 functional blocks we're talking about. So as you can see here, router, WAN optimization, firewall, SD-WAN, advanced threat protection. Some of them are standalone. Right now, like a router is a standalone device, not really zero-touch deployable. And the SD-WAN block right here is indicating that as a crucial piece that if the link breaks, if the SD-WAN breaks, the other blocks can't be deployed because you don't have that connection. So if all these are integrated into one device, so much the better. And why not? Because otherwise, you've got all these different devices that are requiring separate configuration, management, maintenance, different contracts, different vendors, and of course, power gets expensive if you've got a lot of locations. And the worst part is if you're at a central location and you're trying to describe to someone at a remote location how to deploy everything together and integrate them all, that's a whole other layer of complexity. So we definitely don't want that. And so what Barracuda ended up creating is our cloud generation firewall, basically combining all of those technologies, including web filtering and secure access. So everything is in one device. It's centrally managed and available in a variety of deployment options, whether physical, virtual, or in the cloud. So our approach to firewall is security-centric. I mean, it's a firewall, so it has to be top of mind, and that's the key to everything. So what better place to start than the firewall and then build all these other technologies into it. So the cloud generation firewall will take care of all the technology, handling traffic up into cloud instances or even cloud deployed with advanced threat protection, web filtering, all these security features already built into the device. And then it's now deployable with zero-touch deployment, meaning that you can already have a configuration set in the cloud. As soon as that firewall connects to a network, it will call home, and that new profile will be loaded onto it, so you basically don't have to think about it if you're deploying at a new location. So again, the advantage of going with Barracuda is that there's only one device to deploy that's going to give all you these required functional blocks for SD-WAN. It's going to give you security as well as branch to cloud optimization to optimize traffic over the circuits and help reduce MPLS costs. And we've gotten some good reviews for NSS Labs. If you're not familiar with NSS Labs, I believe they're based out in Texas. But basically what they do is it's more about actual numbers, throughputs. So we did a great job. You send them your firewall and you'll get it configured the way you want. And basically they just hammer it with traffic and see how it performs. And we did very, very well on that. So we're shown as one of the leaders in the space. SD-WAN results are published on their website, so if you'd like, I definitely suggest taking a look. But we've done a great job with our SD-WAN technology. So now we can talk about next steps. As you go forward, we just want to make sure that security, again, is front of mind. But you want to keep the simplicity, but definitely don't compromise any of the security. So you can have it all in one device with the Barracuda solution, the cloud generation firewall. It's easy to manage and maintain. You definitely want to evaluate your customers' aspirations for migrating to the private cloud, software as a service, or public cloud, and really just understand the effects on the application and user experience. And of course, remember that Barracuda is here to support you at the end of the day. Support's always around. There's plenty of education available online for free. We just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the product and is maintaining their network and keeping it secure as best as possible. Again, a bunch of other resources online. So if you go to our website, you can navigate to the SD-WAN product technology. It's one of our main menus, and there's lots of assets. Some of the configurations, we have whiteboard videos to show you how these elements and components are brought to life. There's also white papers, solution briefs, product overviews, and so on. That's really going to help you with your decision and make sure that you have a good understanding of the technology. And that's all I had. So I thank you all very much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll I had mentioned earlier. If everyone could just take a minute and give us some feedback, that'd be excellent in helping us improve future webinars. And if you have a question, while we still have Mark on the line, feel free to pop it in the chat or questions panels, and we'll answer that right now. going off of what Mark said, some of the white papers that we have available online, I actually have one available here. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat for everybody to go ahead and access one of our reports. So feel free to take a look at that. And again, if there's any questions, go ahead and ask away, and we'll get right to them.
Great. Yeah, I just saw a couple here. So one is, what if customers have other cloud services, such as Zoho or Dropbox, or other cloud software? Yeah, so absolutely. So it's just where this is deployed, and you just want to make sure that you're routing the traffic in the most efficient way possible. Figuring out where whatever is hosted, is it in Azure, is it in AWS, is it just on the internet, and just making sure that your routes are set up to optimize that flow. Do our customers have to have ATP on your devices, or can they pick and choose the services offered in the firewalls? So something really great that Barracuda does, I actually spent a lot of time at a couple other security companies, Cisco for about 8 years, and them especially, the licenses for features and products and services were disastrous. So this is really nice. Everything is included in the Barracuda model, so in the MSP model. So basically, you're able to offer your customers the full-featured firewall without having to say, oh, geez, you have to buy an extra license if you want to do this or want to do that. It's all included, so it saves everyone some time and definitely some disappointment. So it's all kind of included in the Barracuda MSP model. So you don't have to have it activated, but it's all already built in. So you never have to say, oh no, you can't do that. You need an additional license. It's already there. That's all I see for questions right now.
Just want to give everyone one last minute to throw in any last minute questions. Again, you can always request more information by contacting us at barracudamsp.com/firewall or through sales@barracudamsp.com. Feel free to give us a call. We can definitely answer your questions if you have them at a later time. Looks like we did get one more question in there, Mark.
Yeah, I saw it. Can we mix MSP customers and direct buy customers in the same control center? Yep, absolutely. So whatever you want to do, if you're managing that control center, so if you want to bring a firewall into the fold, it's just a matter of setting up that remote management tunnel, and you can go ahead and do that. So it's not a technology limitation. Yeah, you can consume that and manage that however you'd like.
And then it looks like we have one final question, and then we'll wrap it up. What are some good questions to ask customers to see if they are a good SD-WAN customer?
Oh, that's a great question. So you just want to see what they're doing with the cloud. Are they moving into AWS? Are they moving into Azure? Where's their data located? And then inevitably, people are starting to migrate. Like, oh yeah, we're not doing that in-house anymore. We're hosting that, in Azure. That's when you can start having that question, saying, how are you securing that? What's the connectivity like? What's that experience like? And then talk a lot about why it's good to have that firewall deployed in the cloud. So Barracuda is actually the most deployed firewall in the public cloud space right now, and that's really just because, like I mentioned in the presentation, Barracuda was a really early adopter in that cloud space. So regardless of deployment type, physical, virtual, public cloud, all those features and functionality are going to be exactly the same. So I talked to a lot of people about this, and it's a great way to have that conversation. Say, hey, right now, everything's in house. You got a data center or a wiring closet, or however big that company is. Hey, I've got my my hardware firewall right here. It's protecting everything. Sounds great. A year from now, hey, they decide, hey, we don't want to deal with this anymore. We're going to send everything up to AWS. Great, no problem. Let's just deploy a firewall on AWS, get that same level of protection, same features and functionality, same experience, but now we're protecting it in AWS. And so it's really about directing that conversation about the cloud. And I got another one. What do you say to customers who say SD-WAN technology isn't proven yet? Is SD-WAN another box, or does it replace their MPLS network? Great question. So SD-WAN not being proven yet. I mean, that's kind of a personal opinion. I mean, the numbers are out there. It's an effective way to do things, and it's a lot cheaper than MPLS. Basically, utilizing multiple tunnels and multiple connections to give you that same sense of reliability and same uptime that you would get with a much more expensive MPLS link, just because we can do that dynamic routing and dynamic failover if necessary. So that's kind of how I'd address that. But again, that's security is kind of a religion, so different people have different ideas. But the numbers and the savings are there if they want to take a look at that. Also, SD-WAN is built into the firewall. So the real idea of this cloud generation firewall is, and that's why it's called a cloud generation firewall. We moved on from our previous next generation firewall, is because all of these technologies that used to be standalone devices are now bundled into the firewall, and it can do kind of everything. And so it's a feature that's on the firewall. So it would replace their MPLS network, and again, it would save them that thousands of dollars to have that link. Essentially, buy a couple uplinks from local cable providers. Again, have that consistent uptime over these multiple links, that dynamic failover that I talked about, and you're going to have that same reliability as you would with an MPLS solution.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again, Mark, for joining us today. You definitely have more technical knowledge on this than I could ever hope to. And I really think that it helps going through everything and really breaking down, what SD-WANs are about today. Again, everyone, I definitely recommend checking out the white paper that I have posted the link for in the chat panel. And again, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.